Hi there, welcome. Welcome to another episode in this ongoing series of discussions with the presidential candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic, Mr. Irfaan Ali. I am Nia Subhan, and joining Mr. Ali in this special episode is Brigadier retired Mark Phillips, former Chief of Staff of the Guyana Defense Force. Gentlemen, welcome to this special edition of discussions with the presidential candidate. And the main reason for this special episode is that we're going to talk about security, and there are various components of security here in our country that we will examine. Mr. Phillips will give some basic perspectives on each of them, and the presidential candidate will outline his vision for solutions and what can be done to deal with the situation in the future. Let me start off here with Brigadier Phillips. Clearly there are various components, but more importantly, national security and protection of our borders are issues that the government must deal with. First of all, can you give us an idea as to how you see the current situation within that context?
Thank you, Niaz Suban, or Mr. Niaz Suban.
Fine.
National security, to make it simple, what we try to do is to achieve an atmosphere of peace and tranquility in which the social, economic, and political activities of our people can be conducted. With regards to national security, by now you would agree with me, it is a bipartisan issue, so both sides of the political divide will want to attain a good measure, a good level of national security for us to conduct our social, economic, and political activities in Guyana. As it pertains to threats to Guyana's national security, we normally divide the threats into two parts: the traditional threats, and you're aware the traditional threats is threats of sovereignty by Venezuela, that is claiming part of our land, and also Suriname, that is claiming another area of Guyana. And the non-traditional threats, those are threats associated not necessarily with claim to our territory, but more with linked to the activities. For example, you have illegal smuggling of goods across our border. You have the trafficking in narcotics. You have trafficking in weapons. You have human trafficking. You have environmental degradation. And those are some of the threats that we have to look at. Cybercrime, financial crimes, and in order for us to create an environment, as I mentioned before, where the social, economic, and political activities of the country can be conducted in a safe manner, we have to counter these threats by creating networks to conduct activities against these threats of national security.
All right, clearly there's a more macro look at the overall sector. Let me bring in here Mr. Ali. When we talk about security in our country, especially in the current circumstances, the ordinary man think about their own security in their home. So we're talking here more like community and personal security for the individual. And that's a major concern for many people, if not every single Guyanese. And this is something that, as I said, is on the minds of people. How do you, in going forward, both as a presidential candidate and a future president, will deal with that particular situation?
Well, first of all, Niaz, security is an important aspect of national life. Ensuring that we have a safe environment, an environment in which people feel safe, not only know that there is measures for their safety, but people must feel safe. People must be able to conduct their social life, their economic activity, in an atmosphere that is peaceful and one in which they are not scared to live within the society. And that is fundamentally what we are faced with today. We are faced with a scenario in our country internally where people are scared, where people feel a sense of insecurity, where people are afraid to go to bed at nights in some communities. And this has to do with increase in crime, reported and unreported. Indeed, to address the issue of crime, to address the issue of security in our country, and I'm focusing a bit on internal security, but what Mr. Mark Phillips would have outlined to you is indeed issues of a national security nature that must be addressed in a holistic plan in ensuring our people are secured, our country is secured, and our borders are protected. And as he said, rightfully, the sovereignty of our country and the defense of every inch of our country is a bipartisan matter, and all across the political divide, all of us as Guyanese, we have a responsibility to do that. And as the president of this country, I would definitely be leading from the front in relation to this. But let me say, in terms of national security and the questions you asked, that is security of the family, security of the community, security of commuters, and so on. There are what I would want to term input factors and output factors that would give us the results we desire. Input factors, sometimes we control all the factors, sometimes we do not control all the factors. And the output factors is how the security forces itself, how the system, how the men and women in uniform perform in relation to producing the results you would want or you would invest in to have those results. To do this, we have to ensure that, first of all, we have the right complement of human resources. We have to ensure not only we have the right component, but we have the right training. As Mr. Phillips outlined, the nature of crime itself is changing also. And we have to have our men and women in uniform equipped, trained, and skilled to deal with the different nature and the changing dimensions of crime itself and the issues of security itself. So we have to ensure we have the right human resource complement. And that has to include within it a community component. A community component that leads to wider community participation, greater trust from the community, greater involvement of the community, that would all help us to develop a better intelligence-led approach to crime fighting. And that is critical. Also in the input factors, to ensure that our men and women in uniform are taken care of properly, to ensure that they have a comfortable working environment, to ensure that they have the resources, the equipment necessary to execute their functions, to ensure that they have the right training, the right skill sets that is necessary, and to ensure that they themselves develop a culture that would enable the security forces itself to gain public trust and to gain public support. And these are things that are multidimensional in nature. Now, some people would say, oh, it's an issue of salaries. Salaries is not the only functionality in ensuring that our men and women in uniform are prepared. Training, equipment, non-salary benefits. For example, the annual bonus that was given. This was a great incentive that has to be reinstated. Special programs to help these families, men and women in uniform and their families, to have access to loans so they can build their own homes. Low-income loans, have access to housing, help them in terms of having their children's future being secured through a proper educational system and health system, helping them also with the increase of salaries and other aspects that would make their lives more comfortable, make their family more comfortable. Because on one hand, we have a society and a country that want the output to be a safe, secure environment, one that is stable, and that is important for economic development, for social, a proper social outcome in terms of our society. But on the other hand, you have the men and women in uniform who want to know that their future is also secured, who want to know that they have a good working environment. So my government will be finding the balance, ensuring that the resources that are required is there, holding the system accountable in the provision of security, a more intelligence-led approach, one that utilizes ICT and new technology, modernizing the whole system. And when I speak about modernizing, we have to start implementing a number of the recommendations and report that has been completed. We can't keep conducting studies and believe that these studies would be the solutions to our security problem. We have to get on the move, implement the measures, get active on the ground, operationalize the recommendation so that our people and the people of this country, those who visit us, will feel secure and our borders will be protected.
Mr. Phillips, Mr. Ali mentioned a very important word, trust, public trust in the system. And here, to appealing to ordinary Guyanese, when they call for help, we are hearing stories about long response time. There was one recent report about 3 hours of a response time at a robbery in vicinity to the police station. So we're talking here about the 911 system and everything else. What do you think could have led to that erosion of trust over the recent years?
I think we have to review what is happening with the police force. There are several reforms, reports that were done on the police force, and we have to implement the recommendations coming out of those reports. And I think if we take the approach of swiftly implementing those recommendations, that will help to regain trust in the police force, because simply put, their operational effectiveness will improve. In other words, the police force, yes, the commission police has operational control of the force. The political directorate, however, has what I will refer to as a more strategic duty to work with the commissioner of police, ensure that he has all the needs to address those concerns of the public. We have to do a capabilities analysis of the police force and see whether or not they're well trained, whether or not they're well equipped to conduct their operations. And if there are gaps, of course, gaps will be noted. We have to re-equip, retrain, and reposition the police force to deal with those capability gaps.
Mr. Ali, in terms of the reports that you would have brought into focus, without naming them specifically, of studies that were done, and you're saying that there have been a lack of implementation, what in your mind, I mean, as a member of Parliament, you've been the head of the Public Affairs Committee in Parliament, what do you think could have led to non-implementation?
Now, let me put it this way. The security is a national concern. We have to have national ownership. And resolving the security issue cannot be politicized. We had a system when this government came to office where the subcommittee on security never met for a long while because the present minister views security from a political perspective. And he sees criticisms as political in nature. I remember I spoke of in the media measures that will improve the well-being of our men and women in uniform, and the police force public relations officer replied to that. Now, this is a politician highlighting issues that are of a concern to our men and women in uniform. So, a level of professionalism, and the professionalism must exist within the force itself. Because whilst we speak about public trust, the men and women in uniform must also be able to trust the system and be able to view the system as one that would treat them fairly in terms of promotion, in terms of their welfare within the force itself. Because if they believe that is influenced by other factors, then it demoralizes the men and women in uniform. And it has to be addressed. we also have to send a clear message in crime fighting. We can't say we are fighting human trafficking, and when you see reports being made, and this has nothing to do with nationality or ethnicity. It has to do with a policy. When you see reports are being made that X amount of persons enter your borders, but that amount of persons did not exit the borders, and you see this not as an important issue, but you try to politicize this, then it tells you something about the system. What is the policy? What is the policy? How is the policy breached? What are the consequences? And that is why when Mr. Phillips spoke about traditional and non-traditional threats, we have a situation on our Venezuelan borders too, where a lot of persons are crossing those borders. Look at Trinidad and Tobago. The inroad terrorist organizations were able to make in that society. We have to ensure that we have the right policies. We have to ensure that we develop strategic partnership and we nurture those partnerships that would ensure that we have a safe environment here and we protect or we insulate ourselves. With the oil and gas resources that will be coming, definitely there will be more economic opportunities. Definitely our economy will provide a better future for persons from all across the globe. And they may want to migrate here. So when we talk about security, we also have to look at future issues. Our immigration laws, how do we deal with situations like these in the future? What type of system would we put in place to ensure that there is some amount of scrutiny in relation to who enter our borders and so on? I know there is some amount in terms of the advanced passenger system. There is some amount in terms of Interpol sharing of information and so on. But you can have cracks. We have large borders. So in moving forward, we have to ensure that those borders remain insulated and the porous aspect of the borders are addressed. Otherwise, we will face tremendous challenges in the future.
If I may ask this, some who are listening to you will say, okay, all that is fine, but how do you draw the line or differentiate between what can be termed as humanitarian grounds as against those who are just coming for other reasons? And what can you do?
Well, first of all, Niaz, the United Nations standards are there, international standards, that we have to follow and we have to address. And we have an excellent record as a country in relation to how we respond to humanitarian situation and refugee situation. Those are things that we have to address. But issues, what I'm saying to you, is that issues that we may have thought of, but we never thought of with great seriousness 2-3 years ago, we must now think of with tremendous level of seriousness. Take, for example, the movement of Syrian refugees to the US or to Canada. A whole new set of regulations and rules had to be developed to take care of that situation. And as I said before, with the influx of new wealth and new opportunities, people will see Guyana as an area that maybe they will want to pursue their future. And you can never tell who those persons are, the intentions, but our system must be able to protect our borders. And one more thing, dealing with the threats that Mr. Phillips spoke of, and he mentioned about Venezuela, we have to ensure that our strategic partnerships are secured, developed, the security cooperation, our relationship with the US, critical, because we are in an important geographic zone to ensure the safety of this region, to ensure the peaceful nature of this region, given the threats that we have.
As president, what would you do to deal with that future, what you see as a dilemma coming up, the policies to deal with the projected influx of people coming into Guyana? As president, what would you do to ensure that all Guyanese do not feel a sense that they're being imposed upon?
No, first of all, Niaz, the system has to work. The system has the capability to identify threats, to identify weaknesses. We have to allow the system to work. We cannot interfere with the system. We cannot politicize the system. We cannot seek to manipulate the system to suit, to suit us. That is why I'm saying the issue raised was an important concern. And when you have a minister who seems indifferent to the situation, then it does not give you the right perspective as to the way forward.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes, I'm saying that in addition to the international security cooperation that Irfaan Ali mentioned, internal to Guyana, we have to do a better job of what I refer to as coordination among the forces, interagency coordination. And I think it keep coming up, and we mentioned also the case of the movement of refugees and the movement of people, and I think particularly talking about the Haitians here. The reality of the situation with the movement of the Haitians is that Guyanese, as citizens, need visibility on what is happening. If you have a set of people moving through Guyana, stamped at our airports, and you don't know what happened to them afterwards, it could lead to suspicion. It could lead to a lot of questioning. My point is that the information is there. The minister and his ministry has to do their work. They, through security cooperation with neighboring states, they need to do their investigative work, and they would know that in at least 2 or 3 states in Brazil, there's a huge Haitian population. And Brazil, as you know, was deployed to lead the United Nations effort after the 2010 earthquake. And coming out of that process, we have what we call humanitarian visas are being issued to a number of Haitians who are going to live in Brazil. So a lot of Haitians, of course, you know, traditionally Haitians were economic refugees, but coming out of the 2010 earthquake, there's been an intensification and increase of the movement of Haitians out of Haiti, looking for betterment.
You spoke about the ranks within the force. As president, what would you do? What policy would you introduce to be able to lift morale, motivate the ranks, so that they must feel, okay, you know what, this is my job and I want to continue to do this job as professional as they could?
Just before I get that, I just want to make this point. In terms of, when we speak, I'm not looking at the issue of a nationality. I'm looking at the issue of a policy. If we cannot provide proper answers as a government, then international organizations are looking at us too. And we have a mandate that we have to fulfill internationally. And we cannot operate as if we are isolated or we work how we feel like. We have to work within the context of our international commitment. And we have to provide those answers. And that is what is lacking in this situation.
So accountability.
Accountability is an important issue. But let me say, for the men and women in uniform, we have outlined, and I want them to look at our 2019 manifesto. We have outlined a slew of measures: salaries and non-salary benefit, ensuring that they're well trained, ensuring that their families are taken care of through policies that would enhance the welfare of their children, ensuring that they have access to good education, to good healthcare system, ensuring that our housing program is designed to give them, bring benefit to them, not only in owning a piece of land, but owning their own homes, ensuring that we give them that annual bonus, looking at their salaries and ensuring that we empower them in terms of increases in salaries, looking at training, looking at equipment, and very importantly is their working environment, ensuring that we do a full assessment of the conditions under which they work, and look at improving the fiscal environment, and also providing the softer services, counseling, psychological services are important for our men and women. And in turn, we can then hold them, and we should and must hold them, accountable for their actions in ensuring a safe society, in ensuring safer communities. Because once we equip them and once they have the necessary capabilities and equipment, then they have to be responsible in ensuring that they fulfill their mandate, that is protecting the people of this country. So we have to, whilst we improve their welfare and well-being, we also have to have a good monitoring system, a good system of evaluating performance, a system that look at their actions in terms of response and responding to crime, but importantly, is also sending the message. What is the message the government is sending in relation to crime? How is the government viewing crime? How will criminals view your approach to crime? Because you can't be soft in it. You have to aggressively, and this is why an intelligence-led crime-fighting strategy is important. Because you don't go after the fact. If you can prevent the crime or go before the fact, that is far more beneficial. Then we have to have regionalization. A number of, when you talk to officers, they feel they're uneasy about the future. Today you can be in Region 1, tomorrow you can be in Region 10. So how do you plan your future? How do you plan your life? So we have to examine regionalization, and not examine, but ensure that we have quick response, highly trained squads in every single region to respond to any situation at any moment. These are the type of initiatives, these are the type of policy formulation, and this is a type of strong messaging and implementation that we have to pursue in the fight against crime.
I think that's the kind of thing that both members of the force and the public would want to hear. Yes. Because it's, both of them are.
Well, I don't want them to really only want to hear this. In the next PPP civic government, we want them to feel this. We want them to know this. We want them to understand this. And we can do this through implementation, through monitoring, through evaluation, through and creating an environment in which investors look at us and crime and security is the least of their concern.
Recently, we saw lots of customers of a particular bank would have lost their monies through credit facilities and all of that. Cybercrime we're talking about here, about this. First of all, Mr. Phillips, in your estimation, how big an issue is this here, or a threat for Guyana?
Well, cybercrime is growing, and Guyana will not be exempted from its negative effects. The reality is that we have to expend the necessary resources to ensure our personnel are well prepared to counter the negative effects of cybercrime. And again, interagency coordination. Fighting cybercrime is not the work of the Guyana Police Force alone. We have to have the necessary agencies like the Financial Intelligence Unit. We have to have our IT personnel involved. We have to invest in the necessary software or whatever, or hardware that our personnel will need to do their work in countering the negative effects of cybercrime. So again, we have to approach this issue in a holistic manner, in an interagency manner.
Well, it's not only cybercrime, but as Mr. Phillips said earlier, financial crimes, intelligence-based crime are going to become an important area for us to examine and have the capability to respond to. Why? With oil and gas and with the wealth and the international profiling that Guyana is getting now. Because our profile is being lifted. And as our profile is being lifted, there are criminal minds out there. There are sophisticated criminals who are already looking at our destination and looking at how they can benefit criminally from Guyana and the development that is about to take place. And we have to, at this moment, ensure that we're examining those threats and that we are developing the strategies and the policies and putting in place the system, whether it's physical infrastructure or whether it's laws, but putting in place a system that would enable us to respond to those things. And that is why our strategic relationship with the U.S. and other strategic partners is so critical in ensuring that we get up to speed, we get equipped, and we get trained in these areas as quickly as possible, because what is about to unfold is going to happen quickly. And our response time, not only response time, but our adoption time in terms of having a security architecture and infrastructure that would safeguard us against this type of crime, the time to get that done is becoming even more and more limited.
I think they'll also cover some kind of specialized training.
Oh, of course, yes. It requires specialized training, equipment, it requires specialized tools, it requires greater level of surveillance, intelligence, led operations, as I said, use of ICT, greater sharing of information, more partnership, more strategic alliances. All of this is important.
Mr. Phillips, you were a former Chief of Staff of the Ghana Defense Force. Given the projected development that Ghana is expected to undergo in the future, coming to with oil and gas, and according to with Mr. Ali here, in the context of a PPPC government, the role of the Army, the development of the Army, the modernization of the Army, the context of it, how do you see that down the road?
Well, it's very important. Even before the coming of oil and gas, we've recognized that there are capabilities gap. I will not give any details here, but I would like to say that we need to exercise more domain awareness in our territorial sea. You have oil and gas exploration position on the average about 120, 150 miles off of Guyana. And our exclusive economic zone extends to 200 miles. We must be able to dominate, to patrol, to know what is happening out there. As a nation, we need to equip ourselves to exercise what I will call that security responsibility to the investors out there. We don't have to wait on oil and gas. We have to do it now. So the time is now for us to address the needs of the Ghana Defense Force as it pertains to maritime domain awareness, as it pertains to territorial operations between the coastline and our borders. We must be able to move from foreign bases, which are closer to the coastline, to all our border locations in the shortest possible time, utilizing aircraft, utilizing boats, utilizing land movement vehicles. Very important.
As a potential...
Well, very important for this is the strategic alliance that I spoke about.
Okay, because I was coming to put you in a position as a potential commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Guyana, given the context that Mr. Phillips just outlined.
Definitely.
What you...
Strategic alliance in the short run is critical in getting not only manpower, but you need equipment. And in place. So we have to look at strategic alliance. But as Commander-in-Chief, what you can look forward to is focus on a highly professionalized service, the greater collaboration with the private sector, the security forces becoming very professionalized, looking at the welfare of not only the citizens, but the welfare of the men and women in uniform, ensuring that we provide the right environment and holding persons accountable in ensuring a safe, secure environment in which all our people can feel at ease and at peace every day.
We just have about 4 minutes left, but I just want to come back to a point that you would have just touched on a short while ago, which is trafficking in person. Given our terrain, given our porous borders, given the increased threats that are envisaged, and given how severe this incident is in many parts of the world, and Ghana has been cited in the past for that? What different you think you can do as president of Guyana?
Well, as I said earlier, first of all, we have to look at our legislative agenda. Secondly, we have to ensure that we allow the system to work and we do not interfere with the system. And we provide answers. I don't know how the report is going to address this issue that has been raised, where you have X amount in and X amount out, and then the type of response that you get from the government. So that you have to also ensure that we work with our international partners. We look at implementing the many recommendations that are already there, and we look at the gaps within our laws and our legislation, and we work on bridging those gaps to ensure that we have the legislative architecture that would help us to address this issue also.
Would you say then, as president, within a very short time as president, those recommendations will be reviewed and see whether they can be implemented?
We have already started the reviewing of that, and you will see a lot of what I'm saying in the manifesto. You will see our commitment in the manifesto that will be launched in 2019, and you can be assured of someone that would work every single day to see the vision outlined in the manifesto. The commitments outlined in the manifesto are implemented for the betterment of our country and people.
And finally, coming back to the men and women in the security sector, at the end of the day, despite how we may see things, they do put themselves at risk. They have families like all of us. They have commitments and so on. What would you do as president through your Ministry of Public Security to be able to not just motivate, but to have others who are on the outside to see that coming into the force as a career is something that they can actually do and be proud of it?
Well, this is an important question, and that is why I mentioned the issue of regionalization. We have to look at the gaps and to see what we can do to encourage more persons to come in the force. And as we build a better environment, and as we build better conditions of service, people become more and more interested in serving in the force. And as I said, the more public trust we build, there's greater positivity in terms of choosing a career path. And once people see that there is great focus on the security forces, whether it's the Army, the police force, the fire service, prison service, once people see there is greater focus, then it will be a motivational factor. We also have to implement best practices. Look at the prison systems, for example. We didn't have enough time to discuss that.
Exactly.
But there's definitely need to relook at the prison system, to relook at ways in which we can have a more secure prison, and also in ways in which we can have a better prison management system. And those are important priorities that we'll have to address too.
Gentlemen, let me thank you for coming here on this special edition of this ongoing series discussion with the People's Progressive Party Civic's presidential candidate, Mr. Irfaan Ali. I am Nia Subhan, thanking you for watching.